Hey, welcome everybody to Dr. Osborne's Zone. Today we're going to do a live Q&A with you on predominantly CoQ10. So if you've got CoQ10 questions you'd like to ask, we'll get those answered first and prioritize those. If you missed Tuesday's show on CoQ10, we talked about everything from foods rich in it to which diseases are caused, which medications can cause CoQ10 deficiency, what kinds of symptoms CoQ10 deficiency looks like, what kind of CoQ10 to take, how much CoQ10 to take, as far as lab testing, what lab tests to perform, and what levels in your labs are appropriate. So if you want to do a super deep dive, you got to check out that crash course. But we'll take your questions here today. All things CoQ10. So let's dive in. So Ann in Michigan says, are there different types of CoQ10? Simple answer, yes. When you're talking about supplementation, the two main types of CoQ10 are ubiquinone and ubiquinol. And the one that you're looking for in terms of better absorption and better bang for your dose and your buck, it's ubiquinol. You want to find a product that has ubiquinol over ubiquinone. I take CoQ10 3 to 4 times a week. Is that too much? No. Doses, long-term dosing of CoQ10, upwards of over 400 milligrams a day. Very, very safe. Very, very rare to have any kind of side effect. But generally speaking, Dahar, what we'll see in side effects with people taking it is usually not the CoQ10 at all. It's actually the fillers, the garbage that many manufacturers put in their products that create or contribute to problems for people. So if you're taking a pure product, taking it 3 to 4 times a week, not too much. Part of that depends on your dosing and your budget and what you really want to spend and what is the outcome that you're aiming to achieve. Does berberine interfere with making or absorbing CoQ10? No, neither one, as far as we're aware, does not. Does ACV, apple cider vinegar, work the same? Okay, let's skip that. We'll come back to CoQ10 here. Would taking CoQ10 and fat-soluble vitamins be better to take spaced out individually with no food throughout the day if no gallbladder? No, if you don't have a gallbladder, all supplements, as this is a general rule, this is not true for everything, but most supplements, probably the biggest exception to this, is just simple free-form amino acids, which are fantastic taken on an empty stomach. But for the most part, most other supplements are absorbed better when you take them with food, because when you eat, you're stimulating digestive fluids, digestive juices, enzymes, and a variety of other processes that help your gut absorb. So when we're looking at, is it better to take it on an empty stomach versus taking it with food? Generally, it's better to take it with food unless there's something directly in your food, chemicals or other preservatives that have an inhibitory effect on the absorption process. Now, if you're eating real food, you don't have to worry about that. But if you're eating Taco Bell and Skittles, yeah, there's all kinds of chemicals in that nonsense. And now you're going to have potentially interfering factors with digestion absorption. But real food, take it with real food. Now, to go back to answer your question, are there things you could do? Should you take it in different doses? Should you take it at one dose? With CoQ10, I like to split the dosing up into at least 2 divided doses in the course of a day. So if you're trying to get 300-400 milligrams a day of CoQ10, split that up in 2 divided doses over the course of your day. If you don't have a gallbladder, you can take ox bile supplementation. We have a product called Lipogest that we use in people that don't have gallbladders, and you take this before your meal to help to support that digestion and absorption. So that's something that you can do. Okay. Is your Kirsten asks, is your CoQ10 free of sunflower products? Yes, it is. It's free of sunflower products. If you'd like to read more about it, all the different ingredients in it, Kirsten will put a link up for you, and you can check out the label and make sure it's the right fit for you. Let's see here. I tested low for CoQ10 in the blood. I know that intracellular is a better test, but if it's low in the blood, it will also be low in the cell, right? Should I take ubiquinol for some time? Yeah, I would. Look, if your blood test, the problem with blood tests is they oftentimes come back falsely normal. But if it's low in your blood, most likely it's low in your cells. So if you've got that data, then, 2 to 300, possibly even as much as 400 milligrams of ubiquinol per day would be ideal. And then ask your doctor to recheck it in a couple of months and see if it's coming back up. Remember, you can eat CoQ10 as well, and your body can also make CoQ10. That process is generally inhibited by a number of different things, particularly any kind of medicine that interferes with cholesterol metabolism or production. Can CoQ10 help improve thyroid nodules, high thyroglobulin, and high thyroglobulin antibodies? Thyroglobulin is almost 600. No. As a general rule, CoQ10 is not, there's no research I've seen, and there's no experience that I've shared with people in my clinic that show that CoQ10 directly causes an absence or a diminution of thyroid nodules or antibodies. Now, if you're looking for things that research has shown do affect both thyroid nodules and thyroid antibodies, especially TGAB, thyroglobulin antibody, you need to look into inositol, you need to look into selenium, and you need to look into going gluten and grain free. Those three things are phenomenal when it comes to antibody reduction. And I've seen that in numerous people, but I also see that there are research studies that confirm that as well. And you might go back and check out my thyroid crash course if you want to learn more about those things. Okay, my cardiologist, okay, that's good. Cardiologist has you taking CoQ10. That's a rarity, so maybe you got a better cardiologist than most. That's good. My doctor ordered red blood cell, intracellular blood tests for magnesium and calcium. What are good levels? If you're talking about magnesium inside the red blood cell, above 5 is something that you're looking at. Would a CoQ10 help my asthma and my gut? Lately, I've been having a difficult time taking deep breaths from my diaphragm area. Probably not. That's not to say it couldn't, but asthma is an inflammatory airway issue, typically driven by food. For most people, food. I mean, if you're living in mold, you might be more prone to asthma. If you're living in a highly polluted area, or if you're living in a brand new home where the outgassing is quite high, those are all things that could contribute more to asthma. CoQ10 won't fix those. But what I've seen from a food perspective, gluten, hands down. So if you're not gluten-free and you've got asthma, you should really look into that. And actually, we have some articles on gluten and asthma. Maybe we'll paste that up for you, and you can go read more about that. As far as your gut's concerned, does CoQ10 help the gut? Well, it's going to support gut function, but it's the same thing here. If your gut's broken, if your gut's leaking, if your gut's inflamed, generally there's 4 triggers that could contribute to that. 1 would be your food, 2 would be chemical exposures, 3 would be abnormal microbes, and 4 would be nutritional deficit. Now, CoQ10 fits in that 4th category, but as a general rule of thumb, in my experience, CoQ10 is not the go-to for gut or asthma problems. It's more of a go-to for neuropathy, muscle aches, muscle pains, liver problems, brain problems, energy problems, liver. Those are all areas where we see CoQ10 really shine more as a general rule. Yeah, I think I've mentioned this already, but I'll say it again, Lynn. Ubiquinol is a better form, period. Don't waste your money on the other kind. I'd go with ubiquinol. If you're trying to get the best CoQ10, the best absorption, and the best bioavailable form, you definitely want to go with ubiquinol. It's much better absorbed, especially the crystal-free ubiquinols, which is what CoQ10 Max is. It's a crystal-free ubiquinol. Anytime there's a process to making CoQ10, and one of the byproducts of that process is that the CoQ10 can be crystallized, and that makes it harder to absorb and to utilize. And so you really want to look for crystal-free forms of ubiquinol. Can CoQ10 help your heart if you've already had a heart attack with muscle damage? Possibly so, Laurie. It's never too late. Your body knows how to heal. The question mark is, why did you have a heart attack, and what caused the damage? If CoQ10 is related to that why, then yes. If CoQ10 is not related to why you had a heart attack, then probably not. But CoQ10 can definitely support the heart, the strength of the heart muscle, the ability of the heart to generate energy to continue to pump. So in my opinion, it's worthwhile and exploring. Would CoQ10 help with shortness of breath upon exertion? Possibly. This is one of those areas where CoQ10 helps to convert your food substrates into energy. And so you might find less or a greater degree of exercise efficiency using CoQ10, which could potentially lead to the symptoms of reduction in shortness of breath. So it's definitely a possibility. Is your multi-nutrient vitamin okay for kids 12 and up to take? Yes. It's definitely okay for them to take. Just wouldn't give them the full adult dose. With kids 12 and up, 12 to 15, take 2 to 3 tabs per day with food. Estrogen-dependent breast cancer, are there natural alternatives to the tamoxifen? Neither option, tamoxifen and its alternative, neither sounds great. I wouldn't consider those options. If again, I can tell you what I would do if I had breast cancer. I would consider 0 drug options, because those drug options don't fix the problem. Interfering with estrogen is not. Women don't get breast cancer because of estrogen that they produce. They get breast cancer largely as a result of being exposed to environmental chemical estrogen and estrogen mimicking compounds. This is the stuff that you're now hearing. There's a whole political campaign right now. Not that I want to get political, but it's Make America Healthy Again. And why are we seeing this happen? Well, this is just a confluence of the last several decades of people like myself and others out there preaching truth in the word. And why is America unhealthy? Why do we have so many women and not just women, but people getting cancers, including breast cancers that are estrogen oriented? Because big pharma, big food, and politics are all in bed together, and they don't protect us. They're not doing their jobs, and that's why America's health sucks. That's why we're in such a dire strait, because these people are taking our tax dollars and basically not protecting us with those tax dollars. They're using those tax dollars to make back-end deals with the conglomerates and the business companies that have a direct profit motive of keeping us sick. They don't want us to be better. They want us to be sick because it's extremely profitable. And if you've got cancer, it's most likely environmentally, not genetic. So, these women that are out there cutting their breasts off when they have BRCA genes, it's ridiculous. You get cancer because of environmental exposures to toxins. That's the largest reason. That's one of the biggest reasons why. So look at the sources of potential estrogen in your environment. And when I say estrogen, I mean pseudoestrogens. So cosmetics, plastics, pesticides, herbicides, food additives, and food chemicals are your biggest culprits. Get that stuff out of your life, and you'll go far to reducing your risk of ever redeveloping any type of cancer. Is it okay to take CoQ10 and L-carnitine at the same time? Yes. Can CoQ10 help break down gluten? No. It does not break down gluten. That's not its purpose. CoQ10 helps your body to generate ATP, which is, for all intents and purposes, it's the money of the body, right? Just like in the world, you need money to pay rent, to buy groceries, to buy clothes, to keep a roof over your head, etc. You need ATP in the body to heal, to repair, and to maintain. And the rate limiting step for ATP production by your body, in other words, how your body gets a paycheck, is CoQ10. But CoQ10 will not break down gluten. Does CoQ10 help with metabolic syndrome? Yes. Stan, go back and watch Tuesday's show. I did a deep dive on metabolic syndrome and cardiovascular disease and heart disease and blood sugar, all being impacted as a result of CoQ10. And this is all done in all these trials were done in humans, in human studies. So we have really good data on CoQ10 being very effective and helpful in people with metabolic problems. Any side effect with CoQ10 supplements? Mostly just the fillers, as I mentioned earlier. But as far as CoQ10 is concerned, less than 1% of people taking CoQ10 in research studies have side effects. It's a very low side effect profile. I eat beef heart on a regular basis as it is rich in CoQ10. Is it enough? Possibly. I mean, you can certainly eat CoQ10. Liver's great. Heart's great as a source. Muscle tissue is a great source of CoQ10. So it's possible that you're not deficient in it and you don't need necessarily to supplement. The best way to know that would be to really get your levels looked at, checked. Is it normal for ubiquinol CoQ10 to cause agitation and anger? No. I would look at, if that's happening to you, I would look at the other potential fillers in the product you're using and see if you can correlate any of those to either an allergen reaction, because CoQ10 is not generally going to change your mood like that. What lowers homocysteine if genetically predisposed? B vitamins, B12, B6, folate, vitamin B2, methionine, all help in regards to homocysteine metabolism. Choline can also help in the metabolism of homocysteine as well. CoQ10, not so much. Is CoQ10 as good in a good multivitamin pill? And is 1 milligram, that's like 1 milligram of CoQ10. If you need CoQ10 is like spitting on a forest fire. It's not really going to be much. I mean, it's better than 0 milligrams, but if you're trying to correct deficiency, 1 milligram is definitely not going to do much. Now, if it's in a multivitamin, probably it's going to be in the ubiquinone form. And I personally would never pair CoQ10 in with a multivitamin. It's fat soluble and you need to surround it in the appropriate medium, and a multivitamin is not that best medium for the absorption. My dad stopped latorvastatin, but takes blood thinner Coumadin post-popliteal bypass. Can he take 1 to 200 milligrams of CoQ10 per day to support muscle energy, cognitive? Yeah, safe. There's no contraindication to taking CoQ10 and taking blood thinners. He could go higher than 1 to 200. I would say at that rate, if he's got a history of statin use, I'd probably look at 300 to 400 milligrams a day for a good 30 to 60 days and get him a heavier dose initially. What form is best for CoQ10? Gel encapsulated with emulsifiers wrapped around it to help you, because it's a fat. And so in the powdered form, you then, if you don't have a functioning liver, or let's say a functioning liver, if your liver's in duress and your gallbladder is not functioning properly, you're going to absorb the powdered CoQ10 much less efficiently. So if you're going again for the best type, you go with the gel ubiquinol versus any other variety. I'm not sure I understand your question, Mickey. My cardiologist said I might have Mal syndrome. Doesn't think I need to do anything at this time. I'm not in a lot of pain. Will I be able to absorb this good enough to make a difference? If you're talking about CoQ10, possibly. I mean, yeah, you'll be able to absorb it if you take a good form, but I'm not sure of the context. Maybe reframe your question and I can give you a better answer. Is it safe to use CoQ10 in children with autism? Yes. Can CoQ10 and selenium help with renal function and with hypothyroidism? So indirectly, CoQ10 helps with renal function by helping with blood sugar control. One of the things that damages renal function the most is elevations in blood sugar. This is why diabetics ultimately end up on dialysis, because their kidneys fail because glucose is damaging their kidney, their nephrons. So, if taking CoQ10 helps stabilize your blood sugar more effectively, then yeah, it can help. It can help certainly preserve renal function in that regard. But part of it depends on why your renal glands, your kidneys are malfunctioning. As far as selenium is concerned, selenium with hypothyroidism is very well studied. You need selenium to activate thyroid hormone. So T4 to T3 conversion requires selenium. So in that regard, potentially selenium could be very helpful in a case where somebody has hypothyroidism with low T3. Selenium has also been shown to reduce thyroid antibodies in human trials. So it's just something to consider if you have Hashimoto's disease. Would people with AFib benefit from CoQ10 when it comes to energy of the heart if functioning at 30% ejection? Yes, very much so. There's studies on CoQ10 improving ejection fraction of the heart. And so it's a very strong possibility that taking CoQ10 is going to be supportive for you. Does type 1 diabetics' hourly infusion of insulin lower CoQ10? There's no research on insulin directly causing CoQ10 deficiency. What CoQ10 may do, though, then, is reduce the quantity of insulin that you need to inject. I have seen this time and again, both with diet change and with certain supplementation. CoQ10, lipoic acid, vanadium, chromium, B vitamins. If you're deficient in that family of nutrients, your body has a harder time processing sugar. Your insulin, whether it's in type 1, whether it's the injected insulin, and type 2, whether it's your own insulin production, you become less insulin sensitive. So you develop insulin resistance, and these nutrients can actually improve the functionality of insulin, even if it's the type that you inject. So what we see a lot of times, Ben, is people's need for insulin dosing reduces when they start correcting nutrition. So insulin's not necessarily going to lower your CoQ10, but taking CoQ10 might reduce the quantity of insulin you have to use to maintain good blood sugar control. Where can I purchase a good CoQ10? Ruth, we'll put a link in there for you. Check out CoQ10 Max. It's my special formula of ubiquinol and 100 milligram capsule strength. If you have HDL cholesterol around 300, how do you recommend to check if there is atherosclerosis? I mean, one of the better ways to check is to have there are different studies that can be done, but Doppler studies of your vessels can show whether or not you have calcium deposition in your arteries, which would be an indicator for atherosclerosis. So talk to a good cardiologist who does Doppler testing or does calcium score testing to help get a better understanding of whether or not there's a risk. X-rays can sometimes also show calcification of blood vessels. And so if you've got or ever had any X-rays, you can ask a doctor to look back at those and see if there's any obvious calcifications in blood vessels, because that can show up on plain film radiography. I have brittle nails or brittle splitting nails. Will CoQ10 help? Maybe, maybe not. With brittle splitting nails, it's usually mineral deficiencies, selenium, zinc, calcium, copper deficiencies can all contribute to that. If you're talking about nutrition deficiencies directly related. And protein deficit also very common to be a contributing factor in brittle nail problems. Let's see here. Can CoQ10, I think I answered that. Ted and Linda both asked about CoQ10 and AFib, and the answer is potentially might be very supportive there. How much time can CoQ10 be taken? You mean duration as far as can you take it indefinitely? Pretty much. There's no, there are studies showing that people taking CoQ10 for very long periods of time, again, no side effect profile. It's a very safe supplement to take. So, I mean, if you were on it for 6 months, 12 months, even 18 months, 2 years, it's, probably not going to create a problem for you. But, again, when you're asking yourself, should I take CoQ10 and how long should I take it? It's always best to have a measurement so that you can take it for a time, remeasure, see if it's improving. Because, of all the supplements that are out there, this is if you're trying to use supplemental CoQ10. CoQ10 is one of the most expensive supplements on the market. And that's just because it's very difficult to make. The process of producing it is expensive. And so it costs more. And so when you say, okay, should I take CoQ10 and how long should I take CoQ10? You want to save a lot of money and get it tested, because you can, if you're trying to do therapeutic doses of CoQ10, you could spend upwards of, $300, $400, $500 a month, depending on how high you want to go. And you could get your lab testing done for far less than that. And it would give you a clue in as to whether or not it's even something that might be beneficial for you. Now, that being said, any of you out there that are taking metformin or statin drugs to lower your cholesterol, or blood pressure medicines, if you're in that group of people, it's my opinion you should be minimum 100 milligrams of CoQ10 a day, just to offset the qualities, the fact that those drugs deplete CoQ10. But if you're just on those medicines and you're not getting off of those medicines, you should really consider 100 milligrams of CoQ10 a day to support you from what those medications do. But if you're not on those, get it tested and look at it. But as far as time framing, you can take it as long as you need it. How good is liposomal CoQ10? It just depends. A lot of companies producing liposomal products, it's marketing hype. There's no great human trials or studies that show that liposomal is necessarily any better. And a lot of liposomals are made with nanoparticles that I just personally don't tremendously trust at this point. Many of those liposomals are also corn derivative, and most of the corn derivative, and they don't have to list it on the label, but most of that corn derivative is from GMO corn with potential residues of glyphosate or other chemicals. So it's just not something that I'm a huge fan of. Does CoQ10 help with chronic constipation? It wouldn't be my first choice. If you're chronically constipated, then most likely you're under exercising, you're eating the wrong foods, or you have some type of mineral deficit that is slowing down your peristaltic motor functions, or you're under too much stress. But I wouldn't grab CoQ10 on the shelf and say, this is, 80% of the people with constipation are going to benefit from CoQ10 in that way. It's just not one of the hallmarks that I would say grab CoQ10 for that. Is grass-fed, grass-finished beef tallow a good substitute for coconut oil in sautéing food? Absolutely. Very good substitute. Probably one of the best. CoQ10, any influence on gut dysfunction such as leaky gut? Possibly. Remember that CoQ10 is one of the rate-limiting steps for your body's ability to make ATP, the money of the body, right? And ATP is used in the repair and the regeneration and in the maintenance of all of your cells, including the cells of your GI tract, right? So those cells in your gut, whether it's your small or large intestine, need energy, and CoQ10 is part of how they produce that. So is it possible that it could impact a leaky gut? It's possible. Definitely possible. Can a healthy adult take CoQ10? Sure. Does taking it affect self-production of it? No. There's no research that's ever confirmed that people taking CoQ10 reduces internal bodily production of CoQ10. Much like enzymes, when you take digestive enzymes, your body doesn't look at that and say, oh, we're going to quit making enzymes. Different than hormones. When you're taking hormones like testosterone or cortisol, You will cause atrophy of the glands that produce hormones, but not so much with vitamins, or not vitamins in this case, CoQ10 or enzymes. What are the worst additive preservatives in food dyes? All of them. They're all bad. There's not like one that's worse than the other. A poison is a poison. And when you start mixing poisons and put 5, 6, 10 poisons in, products, you get synergism. So I would encourage all of you, look at your food labels, look at your package labels, look at the products that you're using, and question why some of this stuff is in there. Do we need a blue dye in a supplement, in an over-the-counter supplement, to make it turn blue? Like, what's the point in turning it blue? Most dyes in products, this coal tar derivative dyes, are used to basically to hide the fact that the product is probably rancid and starting to oxidize. And so they're selling you something that's old and yucky, and they're tricking you by making it bright and pretty. Humans love bright and pretty and sparkly things, right? And so the more you can turn our food and our supplements into bright, pretty, sparkling things, the more appealing it is to the eye, but potentially the more toxic it is if you're using chemicals to do that. Can you stop taking blood pressure meds safely after 2 brain aneurysms? Yeah, but you need to work with the doctor, Peggy, to do that. Fundamentally, why did you have 2 brain aneurysms? If the aneurysms were caused as a result of very high blood pressure, then you certainly don't want to stop taking your medication and just risk another aneurysm, right? So now, if you can make the right diet and lifestyle changes and your blood pressure normalizes on its own, do you need to keep taking blood pressure medication so that you force your blood pressure to be so low that you're tired and lethargic all day long for the sake of worrying about whether you might have an aneurysm? No, the whole point of reducing risk is to normalize blood pressure, not to make it subnormal. So if you can do that on your own with diet and lifestyle changes, talk to your doctor about titrating your blood pressure medicine and your future risk. Can CoQ10 help with lipoprotein A? No, it does not help with lipoprotein A. There's not anything that we know of consistently in research that lowers LPA. I've seen clinically lipoprotein A be lowered by vitamin C and by diet changes, but not anything beyond those two. I've not seen anything substantially lower lipoprotein A. Lipoprotein A largely is under genetic control, as far as we know. We may learn something different one day, but as far as we know, that's one that it's tough to change it. What level of CoQ10 in the serum would be considered optimal? 0.6 to 1.2. But part of that is, the problem with measuring CoQ10 in the serum is that your cholesterol is the primary, your LDL cholesterol is the primary carrier. And this is another reason why statin drugs that affect LDL also reduce CoQ10 for that reason. So you've got that statins cause a inhibition of the internal body's production of CoQ10, but you also have the fact that by lowering LDL, think of LDL as the taxi cab for CoQ10. It's what carries CoQ10 and delivers it to cells. And so when you lower your LDL numbers and you block your ability to synthesize your own CoQ10, taking a statin, this is one of the reasons why people have the side effects. But if you're checking your CoQ10 just in your plasma, 0.8 to 1.2 is a good number to look at. But that number should also be used with a ratio of your LDL cholesterol, because if you're artificially dropping your LDL cholesterol and you're taking CoQ10, you may be taking it but not have the capacity to deliver it effectively because your LDL is too low. Kirsty's asking about, I take a liquid CoQ10. The label says coenzyme Q10 ubiquinone, USP grade. It also says it's quinol from form dissolves in water and fat. Does this actually make it ubiquinol? No, it does not. Your body has to go on and convert that into ubiquinol. What about the person taking Ozempic and Repatha? And what do you mean, Lori? What about the person? If you're asking me whether or not those medications impact CoQ10, Ozempic's too new. We don't know. I haven't seen anything about Repatha creating a CoQ10 problem specifically, but I would also challenge, why the heck would you want to take those medications when you could fix your diet and lifestyle and not need them? I read that people with gut issues have a more difficult time converting CoQ10 into bioavailable, and taking ubiquinol with rosemary would be a better option. Look, ubiquinol is a better option, period. So you're going to spend almost just as much taking ubiquinone. You might as well spend a little bit more and get something that's going to work better and more consistently. Can CoQ10 help with severe chronic fatigue? Yeah, it's actually one of the, in my experience, it's one of the things that muscle aches, muscle pains, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, it's one of the supplements that I really like to use for folks. And it's one that we find very commonly in people with those conditions, when we test them, are very much CoQ10 deficient. Can CoQ10 help with weak heart valve issues? Possibly. I haven't seen anything particularly on CoQ10 helping heart valves per se, but so I can't say that for sure that, yeah, that's what you need to do if you've got a heart valve problem. But the CoQ10 is just going to support your heart function overall and your heart efficiency. Will TRT help you live longer? I don't think so. I think most of these people that are on all these hormones, and when they're 60 and they're taking super physiological doses of hormones, when I say super physiological, I mean they're not just taking a little extra hormone because their levels have dropped or plummeted so much that they're trying to have normal levels of hormones for a 60-year-old. They're taking doses of hormones that a normal 25-year-old would have when they're 60 or 70. I think that's dangerous business, and I don't think anybody that's doing that is necessarily going to live longer. I think that they're actually going to potentially have other kinds of problems. But I know it's all the rage right now for people to take hormone replacement therapies, including testosterone. Look, if you're doing it right, you'll make testosterone. Even as you age, you'll make it. And I'm my own personal testament to that. I mean, I'm 52 and I have zero problems with making testosterone. I would say my testosterone is still at the level it was when I was 30. So, maybe some would argue with me, wait till you're 65 or wait till you're 70. And there are some natural age declinations in hormones, and that's something that does happen. But taking super physiological doses, in my opinion, is a bad idea. I tried, let's see, don't allergy nasal sprays deplete CoQ10? Which ones? What's the name of the drug specifically? There are a lot of different kinds of nasal sprays. Some of the nasal sprays then are steroids, and yes, they can have an effect on CoQ10, but not all of them do. I tried all different kinds of digestive enzymes throughout the years to help my digestion a little bit, but I can't understand why I can't tolerate them. I always get stomach pains. Well, maybe you're reactive to some of the ingredient in the digestive enzymes. A lot of enzymes some of them are derived from different fruits or different plants, so plant-based enzymes, and people can be allergic to those. I see it all the time. People are reactive to pineapple. They don't tolerate pineapple-based enzymes, Jay, and so that may be something that that you're experiencing. I'm addicted to nose spray. Thoughts on this? What kind of nose spray, and why are you addicted? What are you taking it for specifically? If your nose is constantly congested and you're having to use nasal sprays to open up your airways so that you can breathe, then you're probably polluting your body with the wrong food or the wrong air, and you need to explore that. there's a study that says CoQ10 can impact Candida negatively. What are your thoughts? I don't think that is something. I mean, I see Candida all the time and have people on CoQ10 all the time, and I've never had problem getting rid of an overgrowth. So I think, without having read that study you're referencing, or whether it was a study or whether it was a commentary, I don't know. But I would say in my experience, I haven't seen that connection. Are you of the opinion that keto or carnivore is the way to go now to solve many issues, including inflammation? No, I'm not of the opinion of that. We've talked about keto and carnivore as tools that many people find very helpful and beneficial, but I'm not a fan of long-term keto, long-term carnivore indefinitely. I think if we look at nature as a mechanism to understand the world around us, nature generally thrives with balance and thrives in a harmonious balance. And I think what people are finding with carnivore and keto is that they're going from a place where they're carbohydrate toxic, where all they're eating is carbs, 80% of their calories are carbs. And so they've reaped the detriment of decades of, processed foods and too many carbs. And that going keto or carnivore is like an antidote to that. And they feel remarkably better doing that. But now let's fast forward, a decade or 2 decades of being restricted in the other direction. I think, what kinds of problems are we going to start seeing? I've seen many of those problems evolve in a number of my patients that have been, keto and carnivore for 10 plus years. We see a lot of nutritional problems. We see a lot of health issues that can crop up. That's not to say that it happens to everybody, but I believe that imbalanced diets lead to imbalance. And so I think that keto and carnivore are both forms of imbalanced diets that resolve the imbalanced diet of excessive carbohydrate on the other side. And that's why there's such a dogmatic religious following in those crowds. You talk to people in the keto carnivore crowds and they're adamant that it's the only diet for everyone, and that, but they haven't done it for necessarily decades to see the potential downstream consequences or side effects. And so I would just say proceed with caution. You can use those diets as tools, but ultimately there are plenty of plant-based foods that offer up great health resources that you should be attempting to try to consume in your day-to-day. And to just, to isolate all those foods out forever, negates the wisdom of, hundreds of thousands of years of humans being on the planet. And I just, I don't buy it. I think the fad will phase out somewhat with time. That's, again, not to say there can't be some benefit. My sister has UTIs a lot and doesn't have a gallbladder. Are there any certain tests or supplements you would suggest for her to talk to her doctor about? Have her ask her doctor for a 24-hour oxalate measurement. Her UTIs, a lot of times people with chronicity of UTIs have oxalate problems, and that predisposes them to UTIs. And so going on a lower oxalate diet can sometimes be extremely valuable. If she doesn't have a gallbladder, then she's probably gluten sensitive. I see this time and again where people have had their gallbladders removed because their liver's being damaged by gluten, and they start forming gallstones and their gallbladders quit functioning properly. And so then the solution by their surgeon is to remove it. So you need to encourage your sister to change her diet. Have her go to a gluten-free society and take our test. We have a quiz for gluten. Maybe we can put a link up to that quiz for Kristen to share with her sister, but it's a am I gluten sensitive quiz, because if she hasn't changed her diet, no amount of medicine, no amount of surgical manipulation is going to fix the core of her problems. So back to the enzyme question. If you're not reactive to bromelain and you've taken multiple varieties of enzymes, and the reality is if you're taking them and they're hurting you, that you probably have some type of pre-existing stomach or intestinal lining damage. And those enzymes, when you take them, are directly interacting with that tissue because your mucosal barrier is damaged. So you might consider asking and inquiring more into that why, or at least investigating as if it's a potential possibility for you. How to increase fat in grain-free diet? Easy. Eat some nuts, avocado, beef, and other meats that are rich in fat. Good, wild fish. Even in a kid. Look, the whole thing with kids, I hear this a lot from parents, but the reality is, quit letting your kid make the decisions about your kid's diet. Your kid's an idiot. And no offense to any of you, and that's not to say that you as a parent are an idiot. That's to say that kids are stupid and uneducated when it relates to diet, and they're going to choose candy and sugar and nonsense 1,000% of the time when you give them a choice. Don't give them a choice, and I hear this a lot. My kid's picky. Okay, guess what happens when you don't feed your kid garbage for a week and they refuse to eat for a week? They get hungry, and when they get hungry, guess what? If you put real food in front of them, they will start eating it. You have to starve them out, not starve them to death, but starve them out of their bad choices, because they're fighting addiction, and they're fighting, chemical addiction from the food and carbohydrate addiction from the food. And you have to help them break through that by not giving in to their whims. And I'm not saying that that's what you're doing, but there's a lot of ways. I mean, most healthy foods contain ample quantities of fat. Just got to feed them real. Does high-dose CoQ10 and B2 help with tremors or not? It can, if the tremors are in part as a result of CoQ10 deficit. Now, B2, not so much in the tremor family, but more along the lines with tremors would be something like vitamin B1, vitamin B12, vitamin B5. That's not to say that B2 couldn't play a role, but more commonly clinically, B12, B5, B1, more associated with tremors. On a histamine elimination for 3 months now and still reacting when trying to reintroduce foods. What do you suggest? Get tested for mold. If you're overreacting to histamine and it's continue to be a problem, there's a strong likelihood that you have mold in your environment. I take Repatha for high cholesterol. Should I take CoQ10 on a regular basis? I think I said this earlier. Any of you that are taking cholesterol-lowering drugs, blood pressure or blood sugar drugs should be considering CoQ10 and diet change in the interim to get your to get control of your own health, so that you don't require chemical pharmaceuticals to mask your illness and give you a false sense of security that you're somehow reducing your risk, when in actuality your risk of dying of a metabolic problem is just as great, probably greater, when you're on medicine than when you're not. What supplements for kids are the best in fall to increase immunity and not be sick? My favorites are vitamin D, vitamin C, and N-acetylcysteine. Those are 3 really tried, true, and effective. Kids also like elderberry, so good elderberry extract. A lot of kids will enjoy that, and elderberry is very potent immune support product, so consider that as well. Is it okay to consume sheep's dairy with high tissue transglutaminase, or not tissue, but high thyroglobulin antibodies? Depends on whether or not you're allergic to dairy. I was having horrific gallbladder attacks. I learned about it, dropped bad fats, and no problem since. Go figure. Doc's still eager to yank it when they see the stones. If you want to try to get some of that pushed out, you might consider bitters as a tool. Some people also perform what's called a gallbladder flush, which is they take in large quantities of citrus and oil to basically do a gall flush. I mean, that's something that you can consider. You don't necessarily have to, but you might want to go look that up and see if it resonates with you. Dairy, yay or nay if it's raw kefir? Depends. If you're allergic to dairy, nay. If the dairy is A1, nay. If the raw kefir culture is just A2, and it's and the culture was not, there was no sugar added to to create the fermentation, then possibly yay. But it depends. Lulu, you might consider watching our show on dairy. I did a deep dive breakdown on all the kind of issues that can come with dairy, because there's nuance to that. It's not as simple as yes or no, unfortunately. But that show might give you some greater enlightenment. Okay to take CoQ10 and ashwagandha? Yes. Children often still also eat. Yeah. Okay, we saw that. I take Tegretol for seizures. Can this affect CoQ10? That one's more going to affect your B vitamins. I haven't seen anything specifically on Tegretol and CoQ10, but definitely B vitamins, vitamin B1, vitamin B12. And so B1, B12 deficiencies can actually contribute to seizure disorders. This is the whole irony with most medicines, right? Is the very disease you're trying to prevent or treat, the drugs end up causing nutritional deficits that can cause the disease, or that can contribute to the symptoms of that very same disease. This is why most people don't ever really get anywhere with med. The false sense of security, and the pharmaceutical companies get a little wealthier, and and then the news becomes more biased because pharmaceutical companies are the primary advertisers, and so you get no truth in media. How can your home be tested for mycotoxins? So that's a really in-depth question, because most people don't understand the difference between mold and mycotoxins. So there's ways to test the home for molds, and then there's ways to test the home for mycotoxins. If we're talking specifically mycotoxins, there now is a new technology that's come out of Europe, where they've done some validation studies on mycotoxin air sampling. So there is a potential way to measure mycotoxins in air samples, but very few people are trained on it and understand it. We're going to be talking more about that in future episodes. But there are also tape lift samples and dust samples that can be taken from homes to measure specifically mycotoxins as well. And so you might talk to a mold investigator, get a hold of a good forensic mold investigator, and talk to them about those types of sampling methodologies. Now, one of the things that you should never rely on as a sole determinant as to whether or not your house has mold is the use of air testing to measure mold spores. That type of testing, although can be helpful, is not the end all be all. And a lot of people, because those tests can be they're so commonly falsely negative, because molds are like people. They have different behaviors at different times of the day. And so when you look at some of the research that came out post-Katrina, what they learned about mold sporation is some species of mold sporate in the afternoon, and they don't really sporate in the morning. So if you have somebody coming out to do air testing at your house in the morning, it's very potentially possible they're not going to detect certain mold species or mold spores, because those mold spores aren't kicking up until later in the day, or vice versa. So air testing can be tricked. Mycotoxin testing, a little less, or a little harder to trick that, because mycotoxins are circulatory in the air, and they're not alive. They're not living structures. They're just byproducts of the presence of heavy quantities of mold. Took allergy test, shows allergic to cow's milk, but not goat. Does that sound correct? Maybe, but when I see somebody, Forrester, who's reactive to dairy, even from cow, we generally have them omit all dairy for 6 to 8 months from their diet, because the proteins can be very, very similar and cross-reactive. And so if somebody's reacting to one kind, they're probably reacting to the other. And we've seen that a lot clinically play out, where somebody tries to replace the cow milk with a bunch of goat milk. They still don't get better. And then we get all the milk out, and then they're like seeing the improvement. So keep that in mind. Any advice or any help for iron deficiency anemia? So can CoQ10 help heal digestive issues? I think I've said a number of times that CoQ10 directly impacts the gut's ability to produce energy, and in that way it may. As far as iron deficiency anemia, you're iron deficient. You can eat more iron-rich foods. You can take iron as a supplement. You can also consider other factors that might drive iron down. If you're a menstruating female, you cycle once a month is going to drive down your iron because of blood loss. If you have intestinal blood loss, occult blood loss, that could also be a common cause for iron deficiency anemia. Occult blood loss is when you're losing blood through your stool, but you can't see it because it's oxidized blood. It turns brown, so it kind of hides in your stool. You might also consider, there are certain types of, if you have other health issues like rheumatological arthritis, those diseases themselves can present with iron deficiencies and anemias as well. So there's a lot of nuance to that question, but the simple answer is CoQ10 helps gut cells produce energy and maintain their barrier. Iron through food or supplementation can help with iron anemia, but ultimately figure out why your iron is low. Number one deficiency in people with gluten sensitivity is iron, and a lot of people are chronically iron deficient and have never been told they had a gluten problem until it gets so severe that they finally figured out. And unfortunately, that could take 40 or 50 years. How accurate is intracellular blood testing? You're asking me about Genova, and Genova doesn't do intracellular blood testing. So, either they've lied to you in their marketing or you're confused about what intracellular blood testing is. But that particular lab does not do intracellular. What supplement that you sell do I need for mold toxicity? And you don't need a supplement for mold toxicity. You need to get the heck out of the mold. Now, if you're out of the mold and you're trying to do some detoxification, there's lots of different things that you can do to support your body's ability to detoxify. And one of those is mycobinder, and it's a mixture of zeolites and charcoal and fulvic acids and humic acids. You could also use liver detoxification support. And so there are a number of things. We have a formula called Ultra Liver Detox that aids with that. With mold, we also like high doses of vitamin C. We also like to see high doses of omega-3 fatty acids, all to help in that process. But number one rule, don't buy any of it. Don't use any of it until you're out of the mold. Because if you're not out of the mold, you just save your money to get out of the mold, not to buy supplements to make you feel better while you're living in the mold. Supplements will not make you feel better while you're living in the mold. Can CoQ10 help getting rid of my lack of energy after 60 years of undiagnosed celiac damage? It depends. Depends on whether or not, if CoQ10 is driving the potential reason as to why you're low in energy. What's the best way to get a person tested for mold? Blood, urine, breath, all the above, not so much breath. To get a person tested for mold, there's several things you can do. There are specific tests that measure for mold allergy. So IgE allergens to different species of mold is one way to detect whether or not a person is having kind of an immune reaction to environmental molds. That doesn't test to tell you that you're in mold, though. It just tells you that whether or not you would be allergically reactive to it. So there's IgE, IgG, IgA that can all be measured in terms of mold, different species of mold. If you're trying to test a person to see whether or not mold is their problem, there's a host or a battery of different tests, both in the blood and urine, that paint a picture, we'll say. Len, so some of those tests, things like TGF-beta1, MSH, MMP9 are blood tests that can help understand whether or not you're having this similar type of inflammation that we know mold can cause. They're not specific for mold per se, but they are clues. One of my favorite tests, is mycotoxins in the urine. Because if you have high levels of mycotoxins in your urine and you're not eating grain, because one of the things that can trick a urine mycotoxin test is if you're eating grain. Grains as a food source can be high in mold toxins. It's one of the reasons why when I wrote No Grain, No Pain, the title was No Grain, No Pain, not No Gluten, No Pain. No grain, no pain, because grains are a source of mold and mycotoxins in the human diet, and they're not greatly regulated in terms of production. So if you're a heavy grain diet, if you eat cereals and pasta and all that, and you do a mycotoxin urine test, you could have high mycotoxins in your urine as a result of grain consumption. So first step is if you're grain-free, now, that urine test is going to be a much more accurate indicator as to whether or not, your exposure to mold toxins are coming from your environment, because you've taken out the predominant food source of mycotoxins. We have a whole show on mold as well that you might want to check out. And we're in the middle right now, Lynn, of a big documentary. We're probably 40 hours of footage filmed at this point, and that's coming to you sometime in 2025. Even when we remove ourselves from the moldy house, we still need to detox it out of our bodies, right? Yes. So if you're out of the mold, one of the best ways is bind it out through your intestines using binders. I like charcoal, zeolite, and fulvic acid, humic acid. I like vitamin C for that. I like sweating for that. Exercise induced sweating if you're tolerable of exercise after getting out of mold. Infrared sweating if you're not tolerable of exercise. But you get rid of mycotoxins through your urine, your sweat, and your GI tract. And so when you enhance the excretion routes, you get to a quicker place. You get on track more quickly than if you don't. And remember that mold toxins are fat soluble and they store in your fat cells. So when you're detoxing, it's pretty normal to have some what are called Herxheimer detox responses, whereas I call it angry fat. Your fat's letting go of those toxins, and those toxins are doing damage on their way out of your body. So be patient with yourself and detox. There's no right solution for everyone. Sometimes some people need to go slower. Some people can tolerate going faster, but as a general rule, there's no one-size-fits-all approach to that. Are there any correlation between the presence of biofilms impeding the absorption of CoQ10? No, there's not any research that shows that biofilms are impeding that, not to my knowledge. It's not to say it's not a possibility, but it's not something I've ever seen any data on. Does Q10 need to be taken forever when we tested deficient? No, you can test it. Like I said, test it. If you're low, take it for a few months and retest it. If you're testing in the cell, you test at 6 months. You take it for 6 months and you retest at 6 months. If you're testing in your serum and your plasma, 2 to 3 months, you'll see changes. A lot of the research on CoQ10 shows that it's a time, 8 weeks is kind of a time frame, minimum time frame, but no, you don't have to take it forever. Bitters, a whole new thing for me. Is there anything specific I should be looking at when looking into bitters? Not necessarily. There are a lot of plants that are bitters that stimulate gallbladder contractions. It's what bitters do. So they stimulate gallbladder contractions. So if you've got some amorphous loose stones, that might help push some of that stuff out of you. But you can also eat bitters. There are plenty of, dandelion and other green leaf lettuces and things of that nature can have bitter effects on your gallbladder, but you can also take bitter tinctures. There are a number of companies that produce bitter tinctures. How long do you need to be grain-free before doing the urine test? At least, I generally say at least 2 weeks, preferably if you've got time, 4. And that's because the half-life of a lot of mycotoxins is pretty short. I think the longest half-life was for ochratoxin A, to my knowledge. I think the half-life of that one is 37 days. So you want to get beyond that time frame to get accuracy. So if you've got time to wait that out and then do it, Otherwise, otherwise you might get a kind of a higher level of that particular one, aquatoxin A. Do what you're doing, which is just break that capsule open, mix it into a little bit of water and drink it down, and that makes it easier. I do not sweat. Anything I can do to encourage sweating again? Exercise outside. Best way to sweat, exercise outside when the temperature's higher. If you're exercising in a gym, the air conditioner's on and it's 70, 75 degrees, somewhere in that neighborhood typically. All you got to do is bump that temperature up into the 80s and you'll start sweating. Otherwise, if you're exercise intolerant, get that temperature. If you have an infrared sauna, get that temperature up 170 degrees Fahrenheit. Heat that thing up and get in there and stay until you sweat. Some people that struggle with sweating, it's a common thing when people are nobody knows why. We don't understand the why. But when people are overloaded and very sick, a lot of them lose their ability to sweat. And I think part of it, the reason why, is their body's just trying to preserve everything because they're sick, and all those resources are precious. But once you can start inducing sweat with diet lifestyle changes in place, then people generally start to regain their capacity to sweat much more effectively. I had an interesting chain of events last week. I had started taking vitamin C as I have high histamine and trying to get to the root of it. I don't realize I was having an oxalate issue, and the vitamin C supplement seemed to push me over the edge. I've stopped vitamin C and having a stool test with a functional doctor to check for Candida issues or other gut issues. Do you have any other thoughts about vitamin C and oxalates? It doesn't do it for everyone. It's actually pretty rare to see vitamin C create an oxalate issue. You may not have an oxalate issue. Have you had your oxalic acid and your oxalate levels checked? Because you may be making the assumption, and that could be potentially wrong. I don't know. It's hard to say with just the phrase that you've written here for me. But if you're struggling with high histamine, you might consider as a substitute for vitamin C, DAO. Diamine oxidase is the enzyme that breaks histamine down. And some people with gut damage are not producing adequate DAO, and so they're more prone to histamine reactions. And so consider that. We have something called Ultra DAO you might want to try. If one is having heart medication that depletes CoQ10, will you need to take CoQ10 long term? As long as you're on the medicine, you should be on the CoQ10. I sat in sauna for 45 minutes and no sweat. Take the temperature up. Get it hotter. How hot was it? I like the comment, just come to Texas, you'll sweat like the Dickens. And that's true, especially if you come to the Houston area where the heat is like no other. The heat is it's very humid. It's very muggy. Thoughts on creatine supplements for general energy and mental fatigue? I think they're fine. I think creatine's super safe, can be very effective as a supplemental to improve energy, especially as you get older. And for mental energy, creatine is a source of energy, right? It's your cells make energy, and there's three kind of primary pathways by which your cells generate energy. There's what's called aerobic metabolism, which is the presence of oxygen. You make energy the most efficiently. And then there's what's called anaerobic metabolism, which is the absence of oxygen or the reduction of oxygen. And so the energy is still produced, but at a much less efficient rate. And then you have the creatine system, the phosphocreatine energy system, which gives you a 7 to 10 second energy generation. And so for many people, that extra 7 to 10 seconds, and we're talking about exercise related 7 to 10 seconds, can make a big deal or can have a big outcome for them. But I think most people that benefit from creatine supplementation, the reason they benefit so dramatically is they undereat protein. If they would eat, because you remember protein, animal meat's rich in creatine, and you get it from protein, but the demonization of our protein stores in the US, so I mean, it's really all over the world. Everybody's saying don't eat animals because you're killing the planet, and eat plants. And so we see more people with oxalate problems, more people with protein malnourishment and creatine deficiencies that they would otherwise get from just eating enough natural meat. So I'm not opposed to creatine supplementation, but I'm more a fan of eating balanced and eating what you need. And if creatine is something you want to take on top of that for general increases in energy, then go for it, because it's very safe to use. But I think a lot of people are out there hawking creatine as a magic cure-all for low energy, and I think you're going to be disappointed in it that way. TBI in 2006, my coordination is getting worse. What do you recommend I do? Get with a good functional doctor who understands things. That's what I recommend that you do. I mean, you can do some supplemental support right away. I would be doing, higher doses of omega-3, 4 grams a day is a good, safe place to start as a general rule. But you need to work with somebody, Matteo, because that's not anything to mess around with. If your situation's getting worse, I mean, you could still have some active problems that are manifesting, and that, there's nothing I can teach you in this show without having a relationship with you that is going to serve you at a high level. So you really need to work with somebody. Why has no other doctor spoke about CoQ10? I ask, and I can't get an answer even about zinc, so I come here to your channel. Well, I can't speak for other doctors other than to say that they're ignorant of nutrition. They just don't study it. The biggest problem in medicine today is schools are recruiting technicians, not intelligent, free-thinking individuals. You've got a massive increase in lower intelligence people who don't have empathy or care for humans. They're in it for the wrong reason. They want to make money. They see it as a path to enriching their lives, and not as a path to enriching others' lives. And that's the wrong premise to come from. And then when you go through a school where the curriculum is largely controlled by pharmaceutical industries who only teach about drug options and surgical treatment options, and largely ignore any kind of nutrition or food or exercise or classic fundamentals of good health like clean air, clean water, sunshine, good sleep, it's all ignored. They don't even teach any of it. And then how do you then graduate a doctor who has any logic or sense as to how to get healthy? I mean, a lot of doctors are overweight and they struggle with diseases themselves. And so I look at that as, the more our education system promotes that as graduating doctors, the more dire straits we're going to be in as a society, because you can't have the blind leading the blind. I mean, would you take financial advice from a guy living under the bridge with a grocery cart full of junk? I mean, he's obviously not wealthy. So what advice is he going to give you that's going to help you achieve wealth? And it's the same thing with doctors. If they're not healthy, run away. If you walk in the room and they're obese, you should run the other direction. If you walk in the room and they can't speak clearly, or they can't defend their positions, or they don't have good reasoning or good logic as to why they want to do something with you, or they shirk questions, or they get offended when you ask them questions about what they want you to do, you should be running, because the only way out of this mess, is to not support it. I mean, the dollar will speak ultimately at the end of the day. And so, the powers that be want ignorant doctors, because when you have doctors that don't know how to promote health and only promote treating disease, making large profits as an outcome, then what you have is a system that's so broken. And then when people go and they're like, well, my insurance covers the doctor. Yeah, your insurance doesn't cover crap, because if your doctor's ignorant and doesn't know any of these things, then why are you paying for insurance that has no benefit to you? And if you don't start speaking with your wallets and your pocketbooks and your feet walking out the door when you're exposing the ignorance of some of this moronic insanity and dogmatic belief paradigm that we have in our healthcare system today, then your kids have no hope for a healthier future. So you have to start taking a stance. It's why you come here every week to learn. But, doctors aren't going to know this stuff. They don't care. That's the bottom line. That's my opinion. Take it for what you will. I know there are caring doctors out there. I know I'm not the only one. There's an army of us that care, but there's a far larger army of them that don't. And they're corporately run now. And so they're not even answering to you as the patient. They're answering to some corporate lackey in an upstairs office building who's saying, how can we generate 20% more profit this month for our shareholders? I know. Let's give everybody this drug when they come into the hospital. I know. Let's run 20% more services. As a matter of fact, I was talking to a pharmacist the other day. She worked for Walmart. And I was appalled at what she was telling me. Walmart was incentivizing their pharmacists, not incentivizing, they were coercing their pharmacists. They were demanding of their pharmacists to distribute more shots. They wanted the pharmacists to give more shots in the pharmacy, right? And pharmacists aren't trained in side effects. They're not trained to report side effects to VIRs. They're not trained to monitor patients after administration of drugs to look for side effects. And so now you have the incentivization of these pharmacists and the demand of corporate lackeys to tell pharmacists you need to make sure that people coming in are getting more of these shots because we want to sell more of them. We want to bill insurance for more of these. And she was telling me there was a woman that came in and she got 6. She was in her 80s and they gave her 6 shots in one day. Shame on those people. Shame on those pharmacists. They all, in my opinion, they all need to be put out in public square and taken care of, but that's my opinion. Okay. Is CoQ10 good for regulating stress? Seems we all live in flight or fight or flight, sympathetic instead of parasympathetic. It's good for energy. What's good for regulating stress is living in a manner that's consistent with your body, right? What your body needs. So the right food, the right exercise, the right sleep, the right sunshine. Mitigating your relationships so that they're not stressing you out, avoiding people that have narcissistic tendencies and vampire tendencies to suck the energy out of you. Like, those are all the things you should be focusing on, not taking CoQ10 to overcome and to offset your responsibilities to do the things that matter the most. CoQ10 is ultimately good or bad. You're asking for the 10-second synopsis. CoQ10 is ultimately good. Can you recommend good functional doctor in Tucson? No, I don't recommend doctors because I don't know what they're going to say. I don't know how they were trained. I don't know what kind of compassion or empathy that they have. And that's just something I don't do. I don't recommend other doctors because I just, even the doctors that I've trained historically, a lot of them, they've trained with me and then they go off and do their own thing and they're doing it wrong. And that's just the way I feel about it. So I'm sorry I can't be more helpful in that regard. Let's see here. I was recently let go from my doctor's office because I was told I wasn't following their office guidelines on care. I was asking for help in many areas, but they kept pushing other things. Yeah, that's the typical, right? That's why don't wait for them to fire you. You need to fire them. That's where they're going to feel it. They're going to feel it in their own paychecks. They're going to feel it when the system has lost all trust from humanity. The very system that we have relied on to help us with our ailments and our illnesses has under the guise of helping us, have hurt us, in my opinion, irreparably and unforgivably. My diet told me that my diet change would have no influence on my blood work. Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah, a lot of you commenting about that. So good doctor for 5 years, under new office policies, big changes, and have to go through third party and can't get an appointment for issues. Started supplementing with vitamin D and K2 and magnesium, and after a year, MRI shows bone calcification and tissue damage in the shoulders, hips, etc. Any idea what might be causing that? And there's so many different things that could be. I don't think it's that because you were taking DK2 or magnesium that happened. I think it's probably got a lot more in-depth. It's got to do with a lot more in-depth things, and so you should probably get with somebody to look into more specifically what might be leading to calcifications in your tissues. I mean, there's a lot of things that can do that. I mean, you could have parathyroid problems. Your vitamin D dose might not be enough. Your KT2 dose might not be enough. You might consider nutritional testing. There's just a lot to unpack. Do you know of any chemical reaction between CoQ10 and cordyceps? No, I don't. When I get cold, my fingertips start tingling. What could be the issue? Well, you could have poor circulation, Brittany. There are a number of things that can, when it's cold and your fingers start tingling, it could be that your blood flow to your extremities is somewhat already compromised, and that cold changes the dynamic of blood deliverability more than what your body can handle, and so you start getting that tingling. You might want to ask your doctor to run some blood parameters around viscosity, so blood viscosity and things like D-dimer and prothrombin time. You might also ask to look at ANA, anti-nuclear antibodies. A lot of times ANA antibodies are positive, and ANA antibodies are linked to vascular damage, and that can lead to kind of a cold intolerance where you start to develop that kind of tingling. So those are all just places to start. Okay, when will it heal my tremors? If you're asking about CoQ10, I don't know. You can take it and you can see, but I can't predict the future any better than you can. But are there linkages between CoQ10 and neurological damage, including tremors and heart palpitations? Yes. Is it going to heal yours? I don't know. Maybe give it a go and come back here and let us know how it goes. Does CoQ10 help with anabolism or catabolism? It helps with all, because remember, it helps with energy production. And so both, building of tissue and breaking down of tissue, which is what anabolism and catabolism are directly under the influence of energy availability. And if you don't have energy availability, then anabolism and catabolism both suffer. Any tips to shrink endometrial polyps and fibroids? Figure out why you have them. Okay. I think we have done it. We've gotten through an hour and a half today. We went a little long. Well, thank you for joining me. If you are interested in learning more about CoQ10, go check out our crash course. We'll put a link down below this video so that you can go check that out. Also, if you're looking for a good high quality CoQ10 ubiquinol that's crystal free and grain free, check out our CoQ10 Max formula. And right now, I think it's on sale. You can use promo code. What's that code? CoQ15. CoQ15. So if you want to support me and you want to support my team that helps bring this show to you twice a week, every week, that's one way you can do it. You can also go visit glutenfreesociety.org, sign up there for our newsletter. We'll send you a bunch of free information on how to navigate autoimmune disease with diet and lifestyle change. And we'll also send you reminders when we go live and do shows. Look, I hope you have a fantastic weekend. We'll see you back here Tuesday evening at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. And again, next Thursday at 12:30 Central Standard